Hey, Dr. Bill Sinyard here. Welcome to God's Love for the Unlovable Gospel Rant podcast. We're going through the book of Hebrews. Today we're going to talk about that mysterious fellow whose identity has just grew larger than life in the New Testament, and in fact used by the author of Hebrews to say that Jesus' cultural gravitas was way off the charts. Right? Curious? Welcome to Gospel Rant and God's Love for the Unlovable. So we're going to skip ahead to Hebrews 7. No worries, we're going to pick up the guts in the middle in a little bit. So first, who was Melchizedek? Context, in Genesis 14, Abraham had just won a surprising, really miraculous victory. He's headed home. Two kings come out to meet him in the King's Valley. We think that's a little bit west of Jerusalem. There's the King of Sodom, a picture of unrighteousness, self-focus, hey, what about me? Kind of guy, right? And the attitude of the king of Sodom is, and by the way, he had already been defeated by that very army that Abraham just conquered with just 318 men. You know, the shame and the embarrassment, you get it. He's got some trauma thing happening. But he's going to demand, Abraham, give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. Arrogant, ungrateful, no joy. Then there's this mysterious Melchizedek, the king of Salem. Salem could be Jerusalem. People speculate, probably, maybe. He's also the king of righteousness, meaning he's other-oriented. He's sacrificial. He's not a, hey, what about me, attitude kind of guy, right? And he's also the king of peace. And he blesses Abraham. He doesn't demand, he blesses. He is the anti-Sodom figure, okay? So here's Hebrews 7, 1-3. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him. And to him, Abraham apportioned a tenth part of everything. He is first, by translation of his name, king of righteousness. Then he is also king of Salem, that is, king of peace. He is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God. He continues a priest forever. Hebrews 7, 1-3. So, all of that could mean that he was eternal. And likely the author of Hebrews is teasing this a bit in the description, because it could also mean broadly, we don't know who his mother or father was, who his great-grandfather was. We don't know when he was born, when he died. So it really is good Jewish rhetoric that the author of Hebrews is using to make a point. And Melchizedek is an interesting choice to identify with Jesus, and Jesus with Melchizedek, because he, like Abraham, isn't Jewish. I mean, not related to Abraham, right? Most likely. He's one of the dwellers in the land of promise that we just don't know much about. He is one that the psalmist in 110 in Hebrews say is greater, and the one who blessed Abraham in the name of God. It's all very interesting, right? So I'm not going to read verses 4-10, but here's the argument of the author of Hebrews. You only tithe to someone greater than you, so Melchizedek was somehow greater culturally than Abraham. Abraham perceived that. He has more gravitas than Abraham, and therefore greater than anyone who is descended from Abraham in his loins, whose DNA was there, right? And that would include Aaron, the first high priest, and all of the Levites, the Levitical priesthood. So Melchizedek is greater in line, social gravitas than all of those. So Mel was a greater high priest than any high priest who ever served in the tabernacle or temple. So Jesus, per Psalm 110, was a priest, but not of the order of Aaron, because he would have been a lesser priest, right? Aaron would have been greater than him genealogically, but of a higher order, the order of Melchizedek, not by birthright or lineage, but by calling and ordination of God, meaning Jesus was ordained over all of the high priesthood, and so was the greatest high priest. That's the argument. So this makes Jesus the guarantor of a better covenant. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. For it was indeed fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sin, exalted above the heavens. He has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins and then for those of the people, since he did this once for all when he was offered up himself. For the law appoints men in their weakness as high priests, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. Hebrews. And made perfect doesn't imply that he was imperfect and then did something and earned perfection. It's a technical meaning referring to the act of consecration by the high priest who needed the death of a goat, sacrifice, to have his sins washed away. Jesus, acting as the great high priest, he also endured a consecration, though he didn't need to. It wasn't for himself. And so he went through the act of consecration. Jesus was made perfect, was consecrated to be the high priest by the death of a sacrifice himself. And not for himself, but for those of us who want to come into the presence of God, even though we're faulty, we're sinners, all of us. So Jesus is greater than Aaron and all the Jewish high priests, because he alone didn't need to be consecrated. He was already sinless, but he is also greater than them, greater than even Abraham, because he is of the order of Melchizedek. Very useful for the author of Hebrews, this metaphor, this trope. So even Abraham submits to Jesus. Yeah? So if you were a Jewish Christian and had held the high priest up as authority and source of redemption, the author of Hebrews says Jesus is even a greater authority. And his offering himself is far greater than anything in the temple. You see what he's saying? And also, if you have long identified yourself as a child of Abraham, the author of Hebrews is saying someone's greater than Abraham is here, so identify as a child of Jesus. And then there's Melchizedek. Yeah? All right, so who is he? There's different points of view. We really can't know. Some historically have said he's an angel. Some say that he's an Old Testament pre-incarnational Jesus. And three, related to number two, is that he is a type, a metaphorical type of Jesus. So what's typology? What's type? Per one scholar, typology is based on the assumption that the redemptive activity of God follows basic patterns throughout history. Hence, typology is commonly defined as the use of patterns of correspondence between persons or events in either in earlier redemptive history and persons or events in later redemptive history. Close quote. There we go. That did it. Cleared it up for me. Meaning, Melchizedek and what he did for Abraham is a type of what Jesus did for Abraham's seed through faith, and that includes me. Jesus was Melchizedek-esque. Yeah? Well, you decide, right? So I want to remind you of one of the possible reasons that Hebrews, the author of Hebrews, focuses on Melchizedek's, right? And it's very interesting. Can't be proven. I'm just saying, based upon my research, could easily be a possibility. We're going to have a little bit of fun. It is a gospel rant here. After all, send me your thoughts. Okay, here we are again, Hebrews 4:14. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession. All right. A couple of shows ago, I introduced you to Jewish apocalyptic beliefs, which were surely around throughout Jewish communities around the Mediterranean Sea, and Jewish Christian communities, no doubt, right? Because it was part of your family throughout the Mediterranean basin. And it goes back to even 300 or so BC, even earlier. The great Philo was fascinated by this. It was in Qumran. Rabbi Zakkai, the man who single-handedly saved Judaism after the Romans destroyed the temple, was an adherent to Jewish mysticism. The idea is that true and serious followers of God were invited to take a spiritual journey through the heavens, a metaphor for intense personal spiritual disciplines, but experiential, right? And it's designed to purify the traveler as they rise up to God, from uncleanness, worldliness, and you go heavenwards through spiritual levels, courtyards, into the spiritual holy of holies, the throne room of God, and represented in Judaism as Ezekiel's chariot. The spirit guides were generally priests or angels, and there was even a regular mention of the mysterious character Melchizedek. So why would this be interesting to Jews who were followers of Jesus, Messianic Jews? Well, one, Jesus wasn't there physically. He was in the heavens, sitting at the right hand of God. So if you were still here and about to endure great persecution, likely from Nero, you would want to see Jesus, to know that he's still there and still has your back and you're still good. You and he are good, right? You would feel exposed, you would feel isolated, and your insecurities would start to ramp up. And secondly, when that suffering comes, you're looking for safe places, your brain is, or safer places, so you could run back to the synagogue in classic Judaism, which at times enjoyed a favored status compared to Christianity. I know that's changed historically. And why? Because they didn't proselytize like Christians did, so they were less of a threat to Rome. The second safer haven would be mystery religions, because they sound Christian. You're not publicly meeting on the Sabbath, right? It's all secretive and underground, and no one could identify you as a member. So you're given things to do, spiritual assignments, which sounds like Jesus, and the goal of which is to join Jesus spiritually in the heavenly throne room. Well, that sounds good, right? So it's appealing in so many ways. So you sign up, you accept a path of secrecy, and you begin passing through the heavens. But the author of Hebrews is in your face, saying, look, if you're a Jesus follower, you don't have to pass through the heavens, because Jesus already did it for you. You confessed it once, and now you just need to cling to that by faith. In fact, to do your own heavenly journey is implicitly to deny the cross. You're saying Jesus' work wasn't enough. You need to purify yourself from all of your sins now. He did some, but the rest of them, the ones that Jesus missed, you got to do those, right? So here's 4:14. So since we already had a high priest go through the heavens, it makes sense, right? And jump through every single spiritual hoop out there, we're just supposed to believe it and not try to add anything to it. That's my rendition of 4:14. Here's 4:15. For we do not have a high priest who is able to sympathize with our weaknesses. I know how you feel, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. So he's been persecuted and he didn't disobey. See, in fact, our high priest can sympathize with our weakness, and Jesus was tempted, but he always obeyed. So Hebrews 4:16, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace. Already, not a heavenly journey that takes months, years, decades, so that we might receive mercy and find grace to help us in time of need when we're being persecuted. So if you're being persecuted, approach the throne. How do Christians do that? The Greek word for draw near implies coming to the Holy of Holies specifically to worship God. Not bringing offerings and sacrifices, right? You have the right of a priest in Christ, so just walk right in. Faith. We talked about faith. Just ask the Holy Spirit for the fruit of faith, in order that you might receive mercy and find grace. That's a chiasm, a parallelism. Receive mercy, grace find in the Greek. It's beautiful. Again, Hebrews is extremely well written. And it's emphatic. That's the idea, because grace and mercy really are kind of the same. It's the same package. You're hurting, you're afraid, and you need some comfort. 4:16 unpacks. So Hebrew Christian, when persecution comes, and by the way, it will, and you're in a place that's beyond your capability or capacity, run by faith to the great heavenly throne room, and you will receive grace and mercy right when you need it. No need to worry that you're not good enough or clean enough, or you've lost God's favor for some reason, or you're being punished like an unbeliever. No need for additional angelic tour guides of heaven, right? Or even priests to give you heavenly secrets or to give you another sacrifice, but by heaven-sourced faith. Ask for that. Here's Hebrews 5:1. For every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of men in relation to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sin. So let me explain. How is it that you can go, Christian, sinful Christian, go directly in the heavenly throne room? Aren't you soiled? Aren't you going to stink up the place? Don't you need some mysterious secret or code word like in Zoom, you need to wait in the waiting room until you're called in to be in a... No. Don't you need appointed priest angels Melchizedek to do some sacrifices for you again? No. 5:1. Human high priests are chosen from other humans and consecrated to offer gifts and sacrifices for their sins. He can deal gently with the ignorant and wayward since he himself is beset with weaknesses. Because of this, he's obligated to offer sacrifice for his own sins, just as he does for those of his people. Hebrews 5:2-3. The good news is that the human priest can have some fellow feeling for those who are weak and gone astray because he's beset with weakness, right? Unclean, sinner who needs a sacrifice too, often disobedient. He needed a sacrifice for his own sin. Hebrews 4:5. And no one takes this honor for himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. So also Christ did not exalt himself to be made high priest, but he was appointed by him who said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." Psalm 2. As he says also in another place, "You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." So, look, all high priests from Adam to Melchizedek are appointed by God. Jesus, too, was appointed by the king, son, and priest, order of Melchizedek. All right, verse 7. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered, and being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. So this is important. He was tempted too. He was put through persecution too. Right? While incarnated in human skin, he had to go before the throne of grace and mercy too. So do what he did. That's our template. When we're persecuted, when we're beaten up, when we're lost, when we're depressed, when we feel isolated, he went to God and cried out for help. And God indeed heard him. Just like he's going to hear you, it was God's will that the answer to his prayer, I know, but this suffering is important. It's going to lead to the salvation of many sons and daughters, and he was willing to obey. The calling, great sacrifice. In the end, his work was perfectly accomplished, fully completed. So what was it? He's now the source of life that has no end. For all those who share his obedience, he was the highest of high priests, greater than Aaron and Melchizedek. So his obedience, says Lane, draws ours after it, and we receive a salvation that does not end. So like the Old Testament high priest, he was chosen and ordained, made perfect, meaning consecrated by the death of a lamb himself, and made perfect. Not that he was imperfect, he was consecrated. He was ready to sacrifice for others as a high priest, the highest of high priests. In his case, he was the high priest and the sacrifice. Yeah? I hope that makes a lot of sense. It's a very powerful Jewish argument, and it should mean something to us. I need to wrap up. I'm writing a couple of interesting books. The first is a teen fantasy for ages 10 to 15. It's Christian, thrilling, adventure novel. One person who just read it said it's life-changing, called The Tale of the Unlikely Prince. Same genre as C.S. Lewis's Chronicle of Narnia. It's fun, it's quirky, about a prince who seeks an amazing quest from a king, big enough to prove his worth and enoughness for everyone, including himself. But he has to learn that not all quests are the same, and this king is just not what he would expect. By the way, it definitely parallels the teachings in Hebrews. Get it for your children, 10 to 15. The second project is a book on overlooked and unappreciated women in the Old Testament, Dance Daughters of the Most High. It's fascinating, lots of fun, great for women's groups, women's Bible studies, book clubs, men as well. Many of these great women, unfortunately, have flown way under our radar, and there's reasons for that. I'll unpack those, but you want to hear their stories. They're mothers of our faith. They deserve to have a voice. If you want to know when either one of these books gets out, let me know, bill@gospel-app.com. If you have benefited from this YouTube show, please subscribe. It helps us out a lot. Thanks ahead of time. You can also follow me on Instagram, Gospel App, one word. Listen, next time we're going to ask the tough question, can you lose your salvation? According to Hebrews. Take heart, child of God.